Live. See, we're live here. Okay, we are live. Go ahead, Graham.
Okay, Nick, I have a question for you.
Of course you do.
You are right
Go ahead,
now in one of those
Okay.
positions where you are getting rid of a lot of equipment.
Yes.
But you have also welcomed some new pieces of equipment in. So you have equipment going in, equipment going out. So you have a couple of the equipment coming in. You have had to figure out what the qualities are that you're looking for in that equipment that came in. You also have qualities of the qualities that you're looking at of the equipment going out, and how are those? What are the criteria that you're looking at when you are bringing stuff in and sending other stuff out?
Well, I started out by making a big list of things that I thought were redundant, or that I was, for some reason, thought I had a better alternative for.
So,
and a lot of times,
like dupes, like you have the same camera,
right.
same
So a lot of stuff comes to me because people give it to me, or I find it at a yard sale and it's too cheap to pass up, that kind of thing, and it just builds up and builds up, and then I get ideas that I want to try something, and then I get tired of it. So you end up with a lot of stuff that you don't really have a use for anymore. So I made a big list of all those things, or even things I like, but really, the money is more important. So you make that big list, and but then what I bought was a digital camera that can adapt to almost any imaginable lens. So now I'm having to go through all of the ones I was going to dump and see if maybe
And
some
buy
of them
more lenses.
turn out to be like perfect for this thing. Fortunately, most of them don't, because the camera demands a higher quality optics. So a lot of the stuff I tend to be a cheapskate, so I have a lot of mediocre equipment, and most of it'll still be going away.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the lenses then. What qualities of a lens make a lens attractive to you? Because we have all these metrics. We have color rendering, we have sharpness, we have vignetting, we have evenness, we have barrel distortion.
Right. So none of those categories mean anything to me by themselves.
Okay.
It comes down to me for a very, very simple thing. If I like the pictures, I like it. That's it. And the problem is that you can't assign that quality to any particular lens either, because it depends on what kind of film is behind it, or what sort of camera it's on, or any of those things. So I just trial and error. I try it. If I get and sometimes you're just lucky and the sun comes out on a day and you get this fantastic shot, and then you think, well, I put a gold star on that, and then you use it for the next 2 months, and it never gives you a good picture again.
This is like golf, though. The thing about golf is, or at least my whole thing with golf is, I'll play golf, and my game will deteriorate as the round goes. But then I'll chip one within 3 inches of the pin, and I'm hooked again. The problem is that I've no control over it. So let's talk about then what your favorite lens is, and what lens or favorite lens film combination is, and how that relates. What are the qualities?
I don't have any favorite anything, so I'm not going to be able to answer that. But
you're useless on this question.
But I can give some examples. So one example I've talked about before, but I have like a 70-year-old folding camera that has a Voigtlander version of a Tessar lens on it. It's a little 4-element lens, and with modern film like Portra or similar films, Ektar, that lens just makes the most wonderful photographs. It almost never fails, and they have
what makes those photographs wonderful?
There's something about the balance of really rich color, because it has enough of a coating to bring the color out,
Okay.
but a low enough. So it's hard to describe this.
Uh-huh.
It's almost sharp. It's like it feels sharp, but when you really look closely, it's always just a little dreamy. And there's
Okay.
something about the balance between what are considered faults and what are considered virtues that just works really well on that particular combination. And it got me very interested in looking at older lenses because a lot of them they worked really hard to make them optically great, but the designs are very simple. And there's a balance that I really like. I don't want, so for instance, the very expensive lenses that go with my new digital camera, I just don't like them. I look at the pictures and they horrify me. They show way too much. The human eye can't see that much. Like, I don't care. I had great vision for many years. I never saw anything like what those lenses produce in my whole life. And I'm not really interested in making images like that. Whereas older lenses present the world to me more the way I feel it, if that makes any sense.
Okay, so the artworks that you are most drawn to, Egon Schiele, Chuck Close, and the Chuck Close before his.
I love both, but I don't identify at all with either one.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Again, you're useless. You're absolutely useless. Let's go to Ethan. Ethan, what are you looking for in qualities of lenses? What do you?
Good. No, I guess
pictures.
It depends what I am going for. Like, everybody who gets into photography probably starts being more interested in cameras and like this is the sharpest lens. When I used to buy cameras, I would hate talking to maybe 70% of the people that I met who were like, look at this lens, it resolves to 8 nanometers. It's like I had, by the time I bought and sold cameras, like I was over, I'd seen every camera. They're all fine. I just wanted to see somebody show me some good pictures, which some photographers really blew me away.
So when you're out trying to take good, when you're out there trying to take good pictures, what is it? What lenses do you find yourself gravitating towards?
Sure.
What are you looking for?
So I think there's a couple of things that I'm looking for depending upon what I'm doing, but generally, like I use photography for photorealism, right? So if I'm duping slides, I want a long macro lens. I've been using those a lot.
You're Chuck Close rather than Egon Schiele.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to argue that Chuck Close is a better artist than Egon Schiele. I'm more of a Schiele fan. But
neither of them are particularly good people, so we won't.
I don't know anything about them personally. I enjoy their work. I think, I would have a much easier time recreating the works of Chuck Close because they're very algorithmic and I can follow that sort of thing. Whereas Egon Schiele had like really beautiful loose lines that somehow are very figurative, and I have not. That's real artistry that I could not duplicate. Although, the ability to duplicate art does not an artist make, right? I got a scanner and I got a good camera, so I could copy a Picasso if I wanted. But yeah, I mean, back to lenses, I think generally I'm looking for something that renders pretty realistically. Sometimes I want like a lens that's going to drop the background out a lot, like for portraits. So two of my favorite lenses are a Nikon 35mm f2 in any series or a Hasselblad 80mm 2.8 planar. And I think those are really beautiful. And like, when I show those images to people, like friends, not necessarily photographers, their reaction is always, wow, that's so sharp. And I say, like, actually, no, it's not sharp. There's like sharpness contrast, right? The person in it is sharp. The background is blurry. So you think like, wow, that's so sharp. But like, actually, if you were to look at an iPhone photo, you would think, oh, this is less sharp, even though everything is sharp. So, the way it renders is nice. Sometimes a little haze and scratches on the front of your lens is nice for a portrait. I try and go, when I'm landscape shooting, if I'm backpacking with like sort of a flat field, really sharp lens. Although, I just wear my cameras and beat them up or throw them in a backpack, so those lenses get scratched up too and get a little hazy and dreamy, which is not like what I'm going for, but like ultimately for me, I think a lot of it has to do with like usability, right? Like I have a 70 to 210 2.8 Nikkor lens, which is like, I would use back in the day if I was shooting a professional job of like, I don't know, some guy far away on a podium, nothing I really liked. And like, I'm never going to lug that around. I'm never going to be the guy with like 6 cameras around his neck and a 70 to 210 2.8 and like, like that. If it prevents me from like enjoying my life, it's going to prevent me from enjoying taking the pictures. But sometimes I have some really wacky setups. I built a 180 millimeter macro setup, so it had like a 90-5, a 2x teleconverter, and then a stack of 3 Nikon rings, and then a converter to Sony, and it was like this long, and I just used it for shooting pictures of the jumping spider that lived in my bathroom. I love those pictures, but
or for clubbing intruders. That's its other. So okay.
So before you start, I think I boiled it all down. So what I like to see.
We have one more person to ask.
I know. Nick. I'm going to finish what I'm saying and let her talk. All right. So I think what it boils down to is I want the lens to add mood and expressiveness to the image without distracting, so that you're not looking at the image and you're thinking, oh, wow, what a lens. I just want you to look at the photo, but if it can add to that, then great.
Give us one example of a choice of lens that achieves that goal.
So some large format lenses do that, I think, very well, because they give you a lot of clarity and beautiful light, but they aren't forcing you to think about them. In fact, you can hardly ever tell that that's what was used when you look at the picture, unless it's got a very shallow depth of field.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Nicole, what do you think? When you're shopping for a lens, are you looking for specific characteristics most of the time, or what's your approach to this?
The last time I shopped for a lens was, my goodness, I think when I used to shoot digital, and that was maybe oh my God, in the 2000s sometime. Then I haven't really, it's really, I mean, I think it was maybe 2006 or 7 is the last time I actually bought a lens. And since then, aside from the film cameras, I mean, usually they came as a kit when I would buy it, would come with a lens. So it was what I used. And to be honest, I don't think of the lens. I just, the type of lens, like when people talk about, oh, this lens is so good and that, it doesn't drive me to want to buy it at all. I just ended up with whatever I had, and I worked with those and adapted to whatever characteristics comes along with it. I just adapt to it.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, you have then you are then creating images without lenses.
Often, yes.
So what do you see as the big difference? I don't mean technically, you have a lens, you have a pinhole, and they are, different physical objects. But what is it about the difference between a lensed image and a lensless image?
You have a lot more control with a lensless image, to me, anyway, because you can create it however you want. I mean, especially when you're looking at movement and when you're adding movement or something like that. I mean, you could do it however you want. You don't have the thought of, the sun getting into the lens or anything like that. It's just really, I go out, I think of whatever it is I want to do, and that's it. I don't have to think about anything else. So to me, it's limitless, basically, in comparison to, the barrel lenses. That's how I perceive it to be.
Yeah, sure. Do you find that you feel like you have more control with a lensless image, or you embrace the chaos that is?
I have more control, and I do embrace the chaos. And I like the fact that it does have its own little characteristics that it just spits in there, and it just blends well together for me. Yeah.
Does it make sense to say that it pushes the control out of the camera and into your hands?
Yes, very much so. Right. Very much so. Yes, and which is what I love. The restrictions are like, there's not really much restrictions aside from, when you have other like weather conditions, that can be one thing, but aside from what you want to create, I mean, it's just limitless.
I feel so limited by pinholes. I love them, but they're so challenging to me.
Well, go ahead, Nick.
It seems to me, though, that I think what Nicole's talking about is that the camera, it is sort of a static thing. It does one particular thing, and you can control all the same things, but you do it externally, but with your actions, with lighting, with choice of background, with all of those things. It's like the difference between watching TV and watching a theater play where there's real people running around doing stuff. I mean, it puts all the controls out into the world instead of inside the mechanical machine and box. I think it's a really interesting idea, and it makes me think maybe I should take a camera and set it on, stop it way down, put a dark ND filter on it, and just leave it set that way. And it would become a kind of pinhole camera, basically, That's a thought, because then everything's slowed down to human speed, right? You can't do anything at 1,000th of a second, but if you slow everything way down, then it's within your brain's capacity to keep up. I think that makes a lot of sense, Nicole. I really do.
Okay. What do you guys say? Would you like to start the Homemade Camera Podcast?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. He always says that when it's too late.
What do you mean?
We've already been going for like 20 minutes.
Okay. So I ran the roll. Today I would like to introduce a very special guest. If you have watched the podcast, you have seen her or heard her before. She is our very first second-time guest, Nicole Small. Thanks for being on, Nicole.
Hi, thanks.
So Nicole is a photographer in Montreal. I really wanted to talk to her today about her amazing Cyanotype series. She made like a tutorial and investigations, and it's like an 18-part series I was just rewatching today on everything you wanted to know about cyanotypes, and it really reminded me of all of the chem lab videos that I watched in college, and they were sort of what I aspire to do whenever I make a instructional video, but I generally fail. So yeah, I was really excited about that. Nicole's also a camera maker. We're going to ask her about some cameras, and then maybe we will take some audience questions eventually. So, hey, Nicole, welcome.
Hi, hello, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I wanted to start off by talking to you about about your image making and your love for the lensless, the pinhole, the alternative, the abstract in some cases, or not as, I wanted to talk to you about those aspects. And I'm for those of you who are watching on YouTube or watching the YouTube version, I have switched to my pinhole cap on my webcam. So I'm coming to everybody through this semi blurry haze. But I wanted to talk about when you first decided that this was an avenue this was a valid avenue for your photographic expression, and how you got there, and what it was that you found attractive about the less photographic processes.
Less photorealist, right?
Less photorealist. Yeah, absolutely.
Originally, when I tried pinhole the first time, I didn't like it. I bought a Diana camera, and I remember I had bought a roll of film, and I bought the camera. On the way home, I took pictures with it, dropped it off at the lab, and then eventually got my results, and I didn't like it. But it wasn't so much the images that I didn't like. I didn't like the fact that it was the movement of me. I mean, I was kind of shifting from digital at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the movement from having a digital camera up to my eye and then this Diana camera up to my eye, I just found there was nothing special about it. It was just too much the same. So I kind of put it aside for a while. And then I don't know how, I just ended up saying, let me give it a second try. And this time I researched on pinhole cameras, and I just saw a simple box camera with a hole in it. And when I saw it, I said, that's the one that I want. I want that one. So I ended up buying it from B&H. And then, I was more so outdoors at the time. It was kind of running into the fall season. And of course, it started to become a little bit difficult because I was trying to learn everything at the same time. And then when it got into winter, I said to myself, I want to know if I can do this in a studio setting. So at the time I had two hot lights. There were two 300-watt lights. And at the time I thought, oh, that's 600 watts. I should have enough light. So I put paper in and I stood there. And then after I said, okay, well, let me measure the light. And when I measured the light, I realized, oh my God, it's like 15, 16 minutes. And I'm like, what the heck? I can't stand for that long. Mm-hmm. So then I ended up bringing the lights like literally really, really close. And then I tried just seeing how this thing worked, trying to guess, okay, how much time would I need and all of that stuff. So I just it was a challenge. And through that challenge, I just ended up loving it. I loved everything about it. Not just the challenge of standing there for very long, but then after you're going into the dark room and you're developing it and you're seeing, okay, what am I going to get with what I did here? What am I going to get with what I did there? And that was it. I was just hooked. And then eventually I started to get more lights. I started to look into different cameras. And at first I had a super wide. And then after I went to a wide camera, and then which allowed me to bring the lights in a little bit closer. And then eventually I got more of a telephoto pinhole camera. And then I was able to bring the lights even closer. And then I started to figure all these different things out. Then I started to play with movement in front of the camera. And I just fell in love with the whole process of it all.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I find it very interesting that you have you're working with a pinhole camera in a studio, because I think that of pinhole camera users, there are very, very few who use it in a studio setting. And it's very much an outdoors, not just even out of a studio, but it's a very outdoors medium for most people.
Well, but you live in Florida. It's sunny all the time, man.
Absolutely. No, I understand that. But Nicole, in Montreal, you get the winter, around Christmas time, you get sunrise at 9:30 and sunset at 4:30, right? Somewhere right about there?
Yes, just about, yeah.
So that is limiting. I understand that that's limiting, but it's not like she's not in northern Norway where they get 22 minutes of sun above the horizon.
It's also freezing cold.
It's cold. That's the main reason. Because it's cold.
Remember, I'm an expat Minnesotan, so I know exactly what it's like to shoot outside in the winter, and I do understand that it does drive you inside. But even
you want faster shutter speeds, in those conditions.
Sure. Okay, so in the summer, are you never in the studio? Is it just a seasonal thing?
Well, I'll tell you from the beginning. When I started photography, I was a studio photographer. Everything was done in the studio. I never ventured outside. It was nothing that I was interested in at the time, and that works with your background in fashion, correct? Yes. Yeah. So, although near the end, I did start to venture outside a little bit more, and it was very intimidating because in the studio, you're setting it up how you want. Mm-hmm. Nothing changes unless you change it. And then going outside, it was like, oh my God, the clouds are coming. Now what am I going to do? It was like, oh my God, how do I deal with this? There's so many changes. So I ended up saying, I'm going to push myself a little bit more and start to work outside. And so I started to do it. But then again, the studio was my home base. So that's probably one of the reasons why when I started for the pinhole photography, the first thing I thought about was studio, because it's embedded to me, studio. Everything was studio. And I'm kind of happy because now I have the freedom of doing it any time of the year. I can do it outside
and any time of the day.
Yeah, and any time of the day as well. Yeah. And we have very long winters, so.
Yeah. I am very aware of the long winters of the Northern Hemisphere. So I'm going to move a little bit. One of the effects of working with a pinhole camera is you have, in effect, an unlimited depth of field, functionally unlimited depth of field. You have the ability to show time, but through movement. What is it about that less than sharp image that you find attractive?
The main thing I find attractive is that I can create different stories in one image on one exposure. That's what I love about it.
Do you have an example of that?
Oh boy. Geez, I have to really think. There's so many of them that I've done where a lot of the double exposures that I've done, those mainly are like, it's kind of hard because not everybody will necessarily get it, but for me, just being able to maybe show fluid movement, but me being in different positions in the image, that's really what drives me to continue working with this. It's so hard to really explain. It's just an excitement that I get every single time. I'm just ready to whip out that pinhole camera in the studio. It's really hard to really get into depth about it, but
it sounds to me like it has a lot in common with performance. So instead of going around with a camera looking for somebody interesting and catching them doing something interesting, you're taking on the job of doing that and making that happen yourself. And like any other performance, like, I don't know, anything from rock climbing to dance, all of those things, there's just moments that work, and you have this sort of stubborn partner in that camera over there that may or may not, get what you want. And so you're like dancing with that stubborn partner over there. And the fact that it's a little hard raises the stakes and makes it more exciting. I don't know. I think that makes a lot of sense, that if I think of it that way, maybe.
Makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I would like to bring up some pictures from your Instagram and ask you a couple of questions about them, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
We've taken this segment from Hot Ones.
What? I'm sorry, what?
Hot Ones. It's a wing eating show on YouTube where they do a deep dive into their guests' Instagrams.
Okay. So the picture that the first one that I
wait, hold on. Let's see how we can share. Let me.
Is it not? Am I not presenting?
No, it's my fault. It's not yours. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna look at your presentation and
okay.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay, so this is relatively recent. We're recording April 2nd. This was posted on March 15th. I think that this is a self-portrait. Am I correct with this?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay. So you are in here twice. You're on the right and on the left. These are shoulder up. At one point, the image that's on our right is looking away. And the image that's on the left, the figure that's on our left, is looking at the figure that's on the right. Mm-hmm. And they're both you. Can you tell me what? And there's real obvious movement. For one thing, you're in two places on this. But for another thing, there's really obvious movement in that there's, there are portions that are visually smudged, and it looks like we have kind of an echo that's going across.
Yeah, it looks like sound waves making an interference pattern in the background. I don't know how you did that.
Yeah, actually, it's. I was wearing a hat, a straw hat.
Sure.
And so basically, in the position, I was just kept moving my head like this because I wanted to get that little shift of the straw hat. I wanted it to be more unified, like more of a circles like this. But I mean, sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. It kind of comes out the way it does. And so really, it's having myself look at myself and then my other self looking away, kind of making like a diagonal line out. I don't know if you see that, but that's kind of what I was trying to create.
Yeah.
Like a line, makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I think this is a great example of the power of pinhole. If that was the same image had been made with some super high resolution modern lens, you would be so distracted by all the clashing between the way the image is blurred and then the way the lens would be struggling to make it look real, that you wouldn't see the beauty of what's behind this, which is about the gestures and the movements. And I think that this is really using pinhole at its best, and it wouldn't be better with some fancy lens by any means. It would be worse.
One of the things that if it were a sharp image, we would see that was a hat. And right now it is atmosphere and it is texture and it is motion. And it, as Ethan said, it looks kind of like sound waves because of the weave of the hat. Mm-hmm. It has concentric circles that are moving away from each figure towards the other figure.
Sort of clashing in the middle in a suggestive way. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I want to, I'm going to ask in this case, the blurriness, the vagueness, the term that I've been using lately is specifically for my own work that I've been posting lately, is that it is not non-objective, it is low objective. And what I mean by that is non-objective is you can't tell at all what it is. Low objective is you can kind of suss out what is there, but you don't, but it's not as explicit, and it is more open for interpretation. It is, the viewer has to bring something, and it's not just image out, it is point of view in. Does that make sense to you? I mean, is this your concept here, or how do you figure out those concerns?
I don't, it's, I really don't think so technically or so. I just have the vision and idea, and I just put it into action, and that's it. I don't think too much. I mean, I generally have a little bit of an idea. Okay, I'd like to have myself doing this, this, and this, and then I just kind of do it. Just do it.
So it's about exploration rather than
exploration.
control.
I mean, I am working with a base idea, and I do have to keep in mind where I have to position myself, how much far I can move, from one space to the next. There's a lot of little things in between I do have to think about. It's not just sitting there and hoping for the best. If people think that's what it is, there is calculations of camera distance, the height. There's a lot of little things.
Sure, there are the technical aspects of you don't want to blow out all of the detail in your face. You don't want to, and you also don't want it to be so far back that it is not visible.
Yes, exactly.
I've moved on to.
Can I ask a question in the middle? Or was that last one taken with really bright lights? Because it seems like a fairly long box camera, like it's got a pretty narrow field of view.
Yes, it was. I think these were about. It was 3 minutes, but again, I have those lights. I got new set of lights actually that I added in the mix to kind of help tone it. Times were getting a little bit long at times, so I kind of added some more lights. So it does help a little bit with the brightness, which really something that you need, and you have to consider also my skin tone is darker. So no matter what time I figure out, I have to add more time. So if it's giving me 3 minutes, I may actually do 4 minutes.
Right.
Depending on, how I'm positioning myself and all of that. Yeah.
Okay. I took us to the next photo in the series, and this is along that same questioning line. The next one, when I say I was just talking about non-objective and low objective, this looks non-objective to me. I have no clue what we're looking at.
We're looking at cookie sandwiches, obviously.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. It's a bundle of okay.
So I see strata and I see eyes.
Yeah, and this is your 9-pinhole camera, right?
Yes.
That you did this with. So there are overlapping renderings of the same image, but what that image is not clear. So I would consider this non-objective. As you are doing your work, and you're with all of us, there are the pictures we create, and then there are the pictures we share. And for most of us, the pictures we share is just a small subset of the pictures that we create. What was it about this particular one that said, I want to share this one?
This was experimental, with all 9 pinholes open at the same time. And, whenever I hadn't used it in a while, so there were some that I was experimenting to see, okay, well, with so many holes open, what's going to happen? And if I move, how is it going to render in the end? This was really, I just stood there and just shifted myself 9 times within that time frame. That's basically what it is, just to see how it is. Now, this is actually helpful to me because if I was to do this again, I'd probably shift wider and not in such small increments, so that you'd see more of what's going on. Actually, my face going from one side to the next.
Oh, I just caught your face in there.
So when you really look close, you can start to see different angles of my face. If you really look closely, the issue in the middle, again, was something that I had the first time I used it because the exposure in the center is always going to be need a much shorter time than all the other pinholes. I did do this over again, and what I did, I put an ND a filter on just the center holes to kind of balance out the center a little bit, so you can get a little bit more clarity. So I've been trying to work with that. Yeah.
Oh, who's echoing here? Oh, Nicole. I thought I was looking at rock strata until you said it was your face, like 5-6 minutes into this conversation. And then I saw one of your faces in the top left. And then as soon as I did that, like 30 seconds later, I saw one right across from it. And now I see like 8 or 9 of them. It's amazing.
Right down in the lower right-hand corner, there's actually a really relatively clear rendering. And right in there, there's a clear rendering. The funny thing is, right in here, I almost see like a mask, like a voodoo mask or something like that in the center.
Oh yeah, there's a cat. There's a cat dead center.
There's a cat that creates eyes.
It's almost like if you're asking how many faces do you see, and then you're going to look and find how many faces.
Okay.
Yeah, so the upper left is the most. Was that the first? Did you start in the upper left?
Yes.
And then move away? Yeah.
Then I moved away.
But that would have been the lower right in the actual.
Yeah, exactly.
You took it. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's really, really great. Well, I saw the eyes right away, but it took a while for the faces to emerge. It's a fantastic piece. I immediately want to try to do the same thing with a bunch of film cameras all aimed precisely where I want them.
Okay, so this is
would be a royal pain in the neck.
This is also an example of a work that is not immediately apparent. It is in there, but it is, you have to work for it. And I just have to say I'm a little bit in awe of this image. Let's take a little bit of a shift and let's talk about the camera that you took this particular one with. It's a 9 pinhole, and is it 5x7 or is it 4x5 or 6?
It's 4x5.
4x5. Okay.
And if I could have gone back, I would have made it bigger than 4x5.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I started with. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I'll get it for you so you can kind of.
Okay, sure, absolutely. And
that's great.
As we're, I'm just, I think.
Yeah, this is an extraordinarily beautiful image. It really is.
I'm going to move a little bit okay, so let's.
Okay, here comes the camera. Let's show that.
Yeah. Okay.
There she is. DIY.
And this is, it looks like it's foam core.
Yes, it's foam core.
Okay. And
I just have something in the back here just to keep its shape.
And do you use Velcro?
Sorry?
I'm going to rip off Velcro as a medium. That's great.
Okay. So for those people who are listening while driving, this is just a box. It is a box that is
it's
just
a black box.
Bigger than a 4x5 film holder. And it looks like it's relatively long focal length. Is that about 150 millimeter?
Just about.
Okay.
Just about, yeah. Close to.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you about focal length here in a second, but sure. It has 9 pinholes all in a grid. And how are these? What is your shutter mechanism on that? Is it
tape?
It's tape. It's just tape over it. Okay. And that works perfectly well. And especially one of the things that I've been thinking about is with your setup in the studio, you can have the lights off expose or open up the pinholes and then light yourself, and then time it with that type of thing, which allows you a lot of flexibility, I think, as opposed to doing it outside. If you're sunny 16ing even like 100 speed film, that's a second outside.
Yeah.
I see some advantages of working in the studio that I didn't previously see. So you were on the LFPP, the large format photography podcast, not too long ago,
yes.
A few weeks ago. And you talked about the idea of moving to 5x7 as opposed to 4x5. And you just said, I would rather have had this be a bigger camera.
Why 5x7 though?
Well, but what's the advantage? Why do you want to make that larger? Make that larger?
So I'd be able to maybe spread the holes a little bit further apart. And also, again, if I'm doing this in studio, I have to be somewhat close. The lights have to be close, and the camera has to somewhat be close to me. So I end up cutting a lot on the sides. So if it's maybe a little bit bigger, I'd have a little bit more room to kind of get a complete end on both sides. So that was mostly why I would have done it bigger. If this was just maybe 6 holes, it would be okay. But I think the 9 holes, it would have to be a bigger camera. But that's just
so would you make it? Would you make it? Hold on. Would you make it wider, but not longer?
Wider, as you mean? Or I mean,
yeah,
like putting it this way, maybe.
It would be a bigger piece of film, but keep the focal length the same. Is what I'm asking.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
right. That makes sense.
Okay, so what you're looking for is the separation of the image circles, right? So still on a 4x5 back, you could make a trapezoidal system that separates, still within the same film size, and make it, think of a pyramid shape where the film is at the top, or at the middle. You would cut the pyramid at the middle. Wouldn't that, because you're looking for physical separation in relation to the size of the image circle. So I think that would do it without needing 8x10 film holders that are, $500 a piece.
No, I don't think it would work, because the outer image circles would go off the film, and you wouldn't get.
It would maybe like make it.
No, you need the bigger film to capture all the faces. Yeah, you just do.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I think that's a good idea. It's a little more wide angle. So what you have now is essentially a normal lens for 4x5. So it's kind of a normal looking. It would get a little more wide angle. It would change that a little bit, but I think and it could be quite subtle. I mean, you could go to 5x7 and just move them a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
Maybe you can design it so they're movable even. So if you had big holes, set your pinhole inside a steel washer. You could slide them a little up and down. You could give yourself a little adjustment there with a magnet.
Yeah. And these also remind me very much, Nicole, we had a guest a while back, Hervé Elena. He did a very similar thing, but his were lensed. But they were also compartmentalized. So like your image circles are overlapping. His were like each one would render singly in a square that came all the way back to the film plane. So
he had something like an ice cube tray, like that separated the images.
I have an
I have an
ice cube tray actually in here. And I did try putting some tubes inside to try and make it more separate. But you see, I don't like it. I don't want it to be completely separate images. I do like the overlap, but I think if they were a little bit further apart, it would maybe help with the center of the image not getting so much overexposed than the rest of the image. So there's things I'm trying to see how I could balance that out. I don't know if you know what I mean.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the idea of having slight adjustment of the position of the pinholes might be really useful too. It's hard to say what would happen. I mean, you could be trying this experiment for several lifetimes. I mean, you start thinking about putting those pinholes in a circle instead of in a grid, and all the things that you could do.
Yeah.
There's no end. And once again, the simple camera somehow seems to provide more opportunities.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so if you're not going to build it, I'm going to build it. So
Okay.
the pyramidal camera. So I've got that drawn out, and so yeah. Okay, so you're building cameras. You're building your own photographic devices. I think that you mentioned on the large format photography podcast about an 8x10 TLR. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that concept and how far you've gotten, and what your goal is? And this is lensed, correct?
Well, I have it built with magnifying glasses, but my whole build is going to change. When I started it, I was heading in one direction, and then actually when this COVID hit and then the stores closed, I had to kind of put it on hold. And then I started to think about it a little bit more. And I started to think about, maybe I won't build it that way. I think I'm going to build it a different way. So I started to kind of think of different ways of how I can make it, which would make more sense. With the magnifying glass lenses, you have very limited focal, sharpness in your image. You're moving it would be too difficult. And I'm actually thinking of doing this with people, not necessarily myself. So that makes it very difficult. But then thinking of the size that I want to build it, and then what I will need to build it, it's going to be a very heavy camera, which would mean that foam core is out of the question. So foam core is gone. I can't use foam core with this build.
Time to get a table saw in your living room.
Hang on one second. There is a material that is very much like foam core that's called gator board. Have you ever worked with gator board?
No, I have not.
Okay. So gator board is it's the same concept, foam in the center, but the board itself is much, much more rigid. So I'm thinking, yeah, you could go plywood, you could go that direction, but there's a little bit of flexibility that gator board may give you. So it would be something to explore.
I'll look into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably like a slightly shiny surface. You might want to
mat it down.
Matte paint. Yeah, right.
Or embrace the reflection.
And also, I'm gonna suggest that instead of the table saw, a small, inexpensive tabletop band saw with a fence. It's just much more versatile than a table saw, and you can still cut parallel lines with it, and it's less frightening. It's less likely to hurl things across the room. I worked with a lot of saws, and I found a small, inexpensive bandsaw that cuts things wide enough for making cameras that I'm interested in making. And so it does have a fence, so you can cut a straight line, but you can also put a thin bit blade on it and cut curves, and you know, it opens up a lot of possibilities. Or even just a small saw with a board as a straight edge. I mean, you don't have to be fancy. Table saw is good for some things, but they don't do as many different things.
Well, the question is, how big is your living room and how many saws can you fit?
That's something else.
Well, the dust from a bandsaw is a lot less invasive. It's not hurled all over the room the way that some other saws do.
Wait, so I kind of want to get back to this idea of lenses and using magnifying glass, single element lenses, and your, I guess, difficulty in getting people anywhere near in focus. One thing that I haven't really done too much of, but my friend Joe has done a lot of, is like kind of making hybrid pinholes. So they're like big pinholes, like a centimeter almost, but it works out being like an aperture stop for a single element lens. I wonder if you would consider, like, you get much more light than a pinhole, much less light than like a f1 magnifying glass, but it winds up being, a little bit more workable indoors. Joe and I made one day. I did not have very much success with it, but Joe's made some good stuff.
No, I've never thought of that, actually.
I got to find you some links. He did a couple of videos on hybrid pinhole optics.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
Sure, that would be great. Yeah.
I'm wanting to take 4 tiny little folding camera lenses and stick them on a single lens board and just stick that on a 4x5 camera. It would give you your kind of overlapping images. And you might need to put some dividers to keep it from overlapping too much. But this like kind of fly eye idea is really appealing. You're doing really wonderful work with it. Then I would have to figure out what to do once I made the contraption. So the easy part, in a way, is coming up with these crazy ideas, and the hard part is making a good image with it afterward.
One of the things, and I'm kind of building on that conversation you had on the large format photography podcast, and there was the question about the lenses and the using the magnifying glass lenses. I have a couple of lenses here that I bought. Some people will recognize that. This is from Surplus Shed, and this is a 100 millimeter focal length achromat pair. So an achromat pair is, let's see, I'm going to try to focus as close as I can. It is 2 parts. One of them is essentially a magnifying glass. It is a double convex, meaning that it's curved outward on both. And then the other half is here, let me see if I can. Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of curve, but this is a convex on that side and concave on that side. This is essentially a what do we call them? A meniscus lens. But when you put them together, they have
better focusing,
a lot of correction. Yeah. Okay. So here I'm going to. And once again, this is great podcasting. So I have taken the lens off my camera, and I am holding up this lens. And what I really need to do is block out the light. Here, let's see if I can block out the light. But you can focus. This is not working as well as I had hoped. But you can create lenses that will focus. Here, I'm gonna get okay. It'll focus a certain distance. I know this is not working as well as we wanted, but you can separate them as well, and you can flip the positive meniscus lens either direction. And here is the double convex, and look at that. That focuses right on, there we go. It's focusing right on me. So this might be a really good avenue to source lenses for that type of thing, or for other projects that sit between a lensed camera and a pinhole camera. But once again, I'm very evangelical about surplus shed and what they have available. And I'm going to point out that what I just showed you is a $6 set. You know, I paid $6 for the achromat pair, and that's, you know, and then so if you need 2 of those, you know, you've got $12 in your lenses. So there is also one other device that I want to talk about, and that is this. This is an aperture that I bought once again on AliExpress, and this is more expensive. The aperture cost me about $20 on AliExpress. Plus, I had to wait, you know, 2 months to get it. But I think that there's some avenues there that are worth exploring. Whether it works for your art, I'm not really sure.
They're worth Nicole figuring out for the rest of us.
Right. Exactly.
We are interested in these things. Yeah. Please tell us.
Yeah, right, exactly. So anyway, those are quite they can be quite effective. So
can we get back to this TLR though?
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
Well, so Nicole, we started talking about the TLR, and then like all of us got real excited to tell you about what we want you to figure out for us about hybrid optics and surplus shed optics. Things like that. But I guess what's the next experiment in, you know, like, okay, one of the things we'll talk about later is in your cyanotype videos, you were like really open about like the ones where you were teaching and the ones where you were experimenting and teaching, and like, I don't know what's going to happen here, let's try this. And then I really love that you were really willing and open to show what, you know, those of us who don't create prototype after prototype after prototype would consider a failure, and I consider just like paying in time and money for information that's pertinent to other things. But what's the next iteration of what are you going to change next on the TLR, and what do you hope to figure out in those changes?
One thing is the mirror. That's the big, I think, aside from the lenses, I think that's another big challenge, just to figure out how I'm going to make the mirror or have the mirror, because the mirror is going to be somewhat heavy. It's going to add more weight there. And the alignment is going to be quite quite tricky. Yeah, that's going to be a big thing to consider. And I want to actually have it where I can, I don't know if I'm going to actually build. You see, I'm still in debate. I have so many different things.
Nicole, can I ask about the need for the mirror? I mean, part of a TLR is you're looking down into it, and can you not just have it as a straight
look straight
shot,
through the back,
straight through the back onto a ground glass?
But I don't want to do that.
Reflex.
But I don't want to do it. It won't be the same thing.
Okay.
Got to get that R in there.
Well, right, R.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's not a twin lens view TLV.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right, that's just a stack of 2 large format cameras. So what is the format on this anyway?
It's 12 by 12. That's the goal. And you know, in addition to that, it's also making my own emulsion. So that's kind of the whole thing together. It's not just the camera alone. It's also making an emulsion and creating images that way. That's kind of how I see this going.
Maybe this is a good time to break up the roles, because making emulsions kind of gets us into the next thing, which I want to bring back to cameras.
Okay.
But I have a couple comments, but you were mentioning that
Good.
aligning the lens might be difficult. And one thing you could do is, yard sales or hardware stores, there are these aluminum triangles that carpenters use that are 45-degree angle perfect, and they're light and they're sturdy. And they make, the standard ones are 7-inch, and that would probably be enough, but they make a bigger one for framing that's probably almost exactly your 12-inch. So one of those on each side of the box would support the mirror at exactly 45
degrees.
Well,
Yeah.
and then if the box is square, and you just have to adjust the ground glass up and down to get it.
Well, there's another issue, Nick, which is finding front surfaced mirrors, right, which are fairly expensive, particularly large. I have a bunch of front surface mirrors that are like $80 a piece in my laser, and they're like this big. And when you have a back surface mirror, they're much cheaper. You can get them made out of plastic in like a hand mirror or a car mirror. But the problem
is the problem reflection?
No, the problem is actually refraction. So on a rear surface mirror, like which everything you've ever seen is a rear surface mirror except in an SLR, right? Because it's much, when you put the silver on the front of the glass or the plastic, it's much less durable, right? It doesn't have a plastic coating or paper, glass coating. But what happens is when you have a glass mirror with mirroring on the back surface, when the light hits the glass, it actually bends a little bit, reflects, and then bends coming out of the glass. So exactly 45 degrees doesn't work perfectly if you're also contending with the sheet of glass basically doing a little lensing before and after the reflection. And so like a little bit of micro adjusting maybe in order, or a way to like I know there are like clock makers and watchmakers who get into melting lead and silver and mercury and making front surface mirrors, and like this is kind of beyond me.
I have another idea that might be crazy, but let's say the glass at 45 degrees has a certain thickness of light path. What if you made a correspondingly thicker piece of glass and stuck it in front of your film?
Right. So, or you could
you
could easily replicate this where you have one mirror, the lens comes in, hits the mirror, goes up.
And a sheet of glass, right.
And then the taking lens comes in, hits the mirror, goes down. But now we're going kind of far down the fidelity curve with optics. This reminds me of my dad bought a Ford Expedition back in the day, parked it on the street in Brooklyn, and it had these blinky mirrors in it. And the first week he had it, they stole the mirrors. And so he bought new mirrors. They were like $400. And then they stole the mirrors again. So then he said, enough of this. I'm putting in mirrors without the blinky ones. So he gets the mirrors without the blinky ones. They steal those. Those are $100. And so eventually, after the third set of stolen mirrors, he goes to like the Dwayne Reed and buys like a hand mirror for $1 and just glues them on. And let me tell you, they were not high quality mirrors, and they were not bent or focused at all like a car rear or side view mirror.
Yeah.
And for you, I remember driving this truck and not being able to see anything behind me. It was so dangerous, but nobody stole those. It was just hot glue and hand mirrors for like 50 years until eventually those mirrors became worthless and you could buy a set on eBay for like $20.
Okay, so another suggestion is if you collect over time from broken cameras and so forth, say 6 by 6 centimeter mirrors out of old reflex cameras, and then tile them together to get your 12 by 12.
But they're not 6 by 6. They're generally
they'd all have to be the same, or else their distances would be different. Well, whatever size they are,
they're trapezoidal in shape in a lot of cameras. I know.
Okay, yes. So
I broke one on my Bronica. On one of my Bronicas, it actually came broken. And
so I got one out of a Fuji GF F, whatever the old name for it was. It was the 6x8 electronic camera, and those things break and can't be repaired. And those mirrors are square and they're pretty big.
Okay.
And you'd want them all the same if you bought different brands.
Yeah.
They'd be different thicknesses and it wouldn't work. But you could tile it. That'd be an idea anyway.
Okay.
I wonder if you could just make your own mirror.
I don't know.
I've got another Google window open right now, searching for front surface acrylic mirrors that could be laser cut to
Yeah, there you go.
firstsurfacemirror.com. I'm
Ethan
now
will
off
make
on a
it.
tangent. Interesting. Pricing and
But I was
ordering.
thinking that, okay, so instead of the 2 mirrors, you could also just put a sheet of glass that's the same thickness as your cheap mirror at a 45-degree angle between the lens and the film, so that you would counter, you would balance, it would be the same amount of diffraction in both. That would be another workaround, I would think.
Yeah, so FSM.com
yeah.
will make you a 12 by 12 front surface mirror out of 3mm acrylic for $90.
Oh,
That's reasonable.
okay. That's
Medium. But I mean, how many of those do you have to have cut before like that's the first prototype. You're gonna go $600 deep into mirrors.
yeah, it's
Well, we'll do some looking.
these are great. These are great ideas, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
These are great things to think
Thanks,
about.
guys.
Thank you.
Super good input. Hey, should we switch roles and maybe talk about some homemade emulsions and cyanotype stuff next, and we'll get back to cameras?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
Sounds great. First vaccination. Yeah.
Okay, and we're back. All right, so when we left, we had just started talking a little bit about homemade emulsions and homemade cameras for the purpose of using with those emulsions. And I wanted to break this up because I wanted to talk about those in some other segments. But I guess I really wanted to talk to Nicole today because of her series on cyanotypes. There's 18 videos on YouTube. I think they're really, really great. They're done extremely matter-of-factly, and it's sort of what I aspire to when I make a YouTube video, although there's always a lot of goofiness and bad filming on my part. But they remind me, I've said this before, like, they remind me of the chem lab videos that we watched before every chemistry lab in like Chem 207 at Cornell, and they're just like, all right, this is what we're doing, and then they get kind of more personal, where you talk about buying every sheet of paper in an art supply store and then testing them and seeing which leads to better color and tone and contrast, and then they even go into troubleshooting tips and testing one variable and seeing what the effect is, and then like in text between the variables or between the experiments, you would just lay out like like you would test the amount of emulsion on a piece of paper or the exposure time, and then you would say like these 25 other things also affect this thing, and it was a really super duper thorough guide into emulsion making, which is something I've never really done. I've thought about making machines to coat film before, but yeah, I was super into them, and I wanted to talk about it. And I'm sure we'll get into other types of emulsions. And I know cyanotype is a very, very not sensitive process, and not really something that most people or anybody shoots inside of a camera. But yeah, Nicole, let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about homemade emulsions of all sorts. And let's start with this. Like, how did you discover the cyanotype process, and how'd you get into it?
It was in 2015 or 2013, I think, when I discovered Cyanotype. Once I got into film, it just opened up a lot of other, opened up to a lot of other searches. And Cyanotype was something that, popped up in a search. So I started to just read about it, and I said, it looks kind of interesting. It's not very difficult. The chemicals are very easy to get. And then I just said, I'm going to give it a shot. So that's what I did. I bought a kit from B&H, and then I went to a craft store. I bought my paper, and I just started to experiment with it. And I love the hands-on that you have with this thing. I really, really enjoy the testing and the figuring out of it all. And that's how it began. Once I did it once, I'm like, I'm going to see how this kind of forms with my own type of imagery and my self-portraits as well. And it just kind of snowballed and has become something that I do quite often. Not as much as pinhole, but it's something that's up there when I decide to do or create any kind of work.
And so most of what you've worked on has been digital internegatives, for lack of a better term, right? And then contact prints. I assume like the sensitivity of cyanotype is something like 0.01 ISO or something ridiculous like that. We had a conversation a long time ago, maybe offline, about like building an exposure box and like not having enough Canadian sun to actually expose these things even in the sunlight sometimes. But I'm sort of curious, have you ever tried or thought about using it as sort of a direct negative or positive?
Yes, I have. And I'll be able to really work on it right now because the summer's coming and there's going to be a lot more sun. I was trying to see if I could figure it out again in the studio setting, which is just impossible. It's just too difficult. So I built a few boxes. Actually, this is one of them here. I have one here. This is the first one that I built and that I was testing with.
That's some lens.
This is a magnifying glass lens.
So, not only is it, and this is for people who are at home or people who are not watching, not only is it a magnifying glass lens, the lens has not been removed from the magnifying glass, and the magnifying glass kind of sticks out from the body of the camera, which makes it way cooler.
You can hold it like this or whatever. Anyway, so it's very similar to my pinhole cameras, but just the lens is different, of course. And that's how I kind of started to experiment with it. The distance here is just very long. So, there's a lot of things I have to consider. And I was also thinking of using a projector lens at one point to try and see if I can get a decent enough projection onto the paper. Not in a camera style workflow, but actually kind of against the wall kind of thing. Having it project where the subject would be here and I would have it kind of project up or down onto the paper. There's all these different things that I was trying to think of, but working indoors with this process, I don't know how that would work. It's just not sensitive enough. I have tried cutting a hole and placing a UV light on top, but it doesn't work it's too strong having it too close because the Cyanotype just goes blue, but it doesn't have enough time to actually get an indent of the image that's shining onto the paper. So I kind of threw that out of the window. And then I figured I'd make an 8x10 like that and work with a bigger one. So this is kind of the same thing, but it's 8x10. I made the same kind of.
And these are ones foam core boxes.
These are foam core boxes, yeah. So I just redid it, and I did it in an 8x10, and I'm really excited because this is what I'm going to try to work with outside. And there is also a matter of the emulsion that I'll have to actually make my own emulsion to make it work. I've there's a book called Ferric and Holographic Processes. And it's a book that has a lot of the old school formulas that are very, very sensitive to than the ones that you'll buy in a kit. And that's what I'm looking to work with, as well as working with a process that creates a direct positive onto the paper. So that's
really?
something else I'm looking at. Yeah. So then, yeah, that's another thing. So this is a kind of a huge project for me. And I have very limited time because the summer's not very long. I don't know how long this is going to take me to get, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to get some successful images with this whole process in this box camera. That's my goal for the Cyanotype in a box.
And that's still going to be plenty slow enough to use, the top hat shutter approach rather than you're still looking at long exposures, right?
Yeah, it's still going to be long exposures, but I'm hoping with the combination of maybe an emulsion that's much more sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it might pull in something. I don't know. I have to figure something out. I was kind of going to build the camera as well, like kind of having like a sunroof to help more UV light enter the box. So that's another way that I might be exercising to see if that might actually help with, increasing more sensitivity so that the exposures won't be as long again. So there's a lot of factors that I'm have to think about. I have my list and I'm just going to go through each of them. And if I have to alter the box, I'll alter the box to whatever next step I decide to take. And hopefully,
I guess you could always crank up the lights too, I guess.
Well, when you're out in the sun, this is the thing. It has to be completely like, a really super bright sunny day. I don't know if I have to be on a mountaintop or something to make it work, but
that would help.
There's a lot of considerations. But I'm excited for this project for the summer. Hoping that that'll work.
I played around with this a little bit before, trying to expose onto cyanotype sensitive paper using one of my view cameras, and it failed miserably. And eventually, I hit upon one of the factors, and that is that every one of my lenses was coated to eliminate UV light. So that's one of the things that I'm sure those magnifying glasses are not coated, but that is something that those of you experimenting at home, and one of the ways to find that out is put the lens on the piece of paper, expose it in the sun, and if there is a change in sensitivity, it's coated black. So I think that's that's one thing to work.
So hey, Ethan, are there any subs?
Nick, you just cut out. I got hey.
I don't know why. Well, my microphone's on. Can you not hear me?
Yeah.
No, hold on. Okay.
Yeah, I think it cut out on your end, Ethan.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wondered if there were any substances you could make a lens out of that transmit UV light better than glass.
This is a great question.
That's a great question. That is an excellent question. Yeah, because at one point I was thinking of using an actual lens, but then again, you have the issue of it blocking UV light. But
my guess
that's
is
a very good question.
Polycarbonate would work a little bit better than standard, flint or crown glass, but that's totally just made up.
No, my eye. So this is a concern. I work in front of a very bright forge that throws out basically sunlight, and my eye doctor said polycarbonate is a perfectly good UV blocker, and I don't have to worry about my eyes frying. So, because most safety glasses are polycarbonate. Yep. Yeah. So I don't know, but something to think about anyway.
Interesting. Francois in the chat suggests using like a giant Fresnel lens. Might be a good light collector, if not super sharp.
Oh yeah.
He also says that glass transmits UV, but acrylic does not. So I had it backwards again. I know that this is possible. I don't know, what the what the appropriate material is.
So you were talking about making your own emulsion. Let's head down that path.
Okay.
Are you looking for? And here I have to leave in a couple of minutes. I am going to show because I have that same deal. I just wanted to show you guys this big
Wow.
rusted tin liter. This is DuPont 40B liter. And what it is, and by the way, this is DuPont, but I got it from a guy in Russia. So what it is it is 35 millimeter film that is clear. So it is unperforated. So it's not, you can't get the cool perforations, and show that you're really a film person. But the other thing that I have is the Rockland liquid light. So this is a direction that I have been interested in, but I want to know where are you going with this? First of all, what's your goal? What can you do with your emulsion that you can't do with somebody else's emulsion? And then what's your direction? Where are you heading on that?
Well, it's not so much making an emulsion that's necessarily completely unique or different than what's already out there. It's really just being able to make it myself. As things are going, things are becoming a little bit more expensive. And also, some things here are, becoming less available. And, I just thought one day, you know what, I'd love to be able to make my own things. Like if something ever is to happen, I'd still have the means to continue, which started off with making my own film developer, my own fixer. It started off like that. That's how it really started off. And then it's kind of just bloomed into thinking, I wonder if I could do this and I wonder if I could do that. And then it just kind of snowballed. And then it kind of started to connect with work that I wanted to create and work and ideas and projects that I had. And I figured, I could maybe combine the two together and maybe create something even more unique than what I have been already creating. So that's really where it kind of started and where I'm at with the idea of it right now. So yeah, that's kind of where it's going. And I think maybe a goal would also is to make a more sensitive paper than the average 6 ISO, which is going to take a lot of back and forth and a lot of back and forth. But I'd love to be able to make emulsion on paper that's has much more higher sensitivity than the ISO 6. And if
that would be really great.
That's really where I want to go.
Do you think that it might be something that you would do another series on?
If I get it and things work out right, yeah, I definitely would do a series on that for sure. Definitely. Yeah.
That will kind of change the internet landscape should you succeed in any facet of this. And so bringing it back to homemade cameras, so this is something you envision using in a 1 foot square TLR. Are there other cameras that you have already made that you think that this would be a fun emulsion for, or other cameras that you would like to build particularly for homemade emulsions, right? I think they have probably qualities that would lend itself to it, like big lenses. and
I do have I have an 8x10 that I built as well with a graphic lens that I just stuck on the top of it, and I kind of use that as an 8x10. It does work similar to a pinhole camera. I'd like to make emulsion for that as well. So, there's I think if I do get it and it works, it probably will end up being for everything that I make to some degree. I think once I start, it's it. You know, I don't think I'm going to really go back to anything else. So, yeah. Yeah.
Not even 35 millimeter film?
I actually do have 35 millimeter film that's blank, like Graham has. I do have. I bought like a small roll, and it does have the little holes in it as well. It does have the holes in it. So I'm going to start with 35.
Yeah, yours with the sprocket holes.
Yeah, the sprocket holes. So just makes it a little easier to go into the camera, you know. But I'm going to try and see how that works. I mean, I would love to work more so with 120, but 35 was all I could find. So I'm going to start with the 35 and slowly build myself up. But I will start with paper first, get that down, see how that works out, and then slowly then move on to other venues. I'm sure that'll come up.
So I'm not sure what you meant by not finding 120.
120 blank film. I can't seem to find any of that.
Oh, you mean uncoated? I get
uncoated,
you.
Yeah.
Right.
I found 35, and that's about all that I've seen to have. And I just don't know how that would work, you know, or if that even exists at all. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's in layers. You wouldn't be able to just wash it off or anything.
No, exactly. So that's the problem with that. But
so
if
now
it has to be.
So now I'm looking through books hastily, and I won't be able to do it on this show, but I have a bunch of books with recipes, and I'm wondering about alternative processes like cyanotype that are more sensitive to regular light. That maybe that would be another avenue, because obviously you don't want to make a giant flash that that gives you skin cancer. So, but a way to get, but something in the in the more in the normal range of wavelengths, if you could have an alternative process that was reacting to that.
Yeah, there is salt printing. There is salt printing that I've considered, but you use silver nitrate with that. And silver nitrate's not cheap.
Right.
It's not cheap. So
right.
That's one reason why I kind of went back to the cyanotype.
Yeah.
It's quite expensive. And if I am going to use it for emulsion and stuff, I'd rather spend the money for that than on salt printing. I'd much rather put it, invest it in there.
So I think of the way silver nitrate works as essentially being speeded up tarnishing. It's basically metal that is tarnishing. And I always wondered if there'd be a way to do some sort of, rust-based emulsion. But I guess it wouldn't be photosensitive. You'd have to spray everything with water or something. I don't know. It probably wouldn't work at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of experimenting that I'm going to have to do with this. A lot
Speed is the thing. Yeah. That's the hard thing.
Yeah. I mean, I got all I have all my tools, everything that I need to make it. And it's just a matter of just sitting down now and just going for it. So, it's, I got my magnetic stirrers. I got 2 of those, and I got one that doesn't heat. I'm ready and all set to go. It's just a matter of figuring out. Oh, in the studio, not here, not home, in the studio. Yeah. So, and I've read a lot about, it's the most crucial part is when you're putting the silver nitrate into the gelatin, the speed. And the amount that you're putting in at a certain amount of time. Those are very crucial things to, I guess, take note of and record, which then can either give you an emulsion that's very grainy or an emulsion that's very slow. So there's a lot of these little things that I have to really take note of. So I've been reading a lot of books, going back to the old school books, reading a lot of that and seeing, how and what they did to get, to end up with the results that they were getting. And in terms of speed as well of the emulsion. So there's a lot of reading. I've been doing a lot of reading right now. And I slowly went through my list, got all my tools. And I'm hoping to maybe get a little head start on that, probably only midsummer, but yeah, that's kind of my goal with that.
So I have a kind of a kooky idea from left field that may be of no use to you, but if you were to be making your own emulsion on a large, piece of material and have it in your big camera, and it was slow, and that was an issue, you could say it was a multi-lens camera. You could isolate one lens, perhaps in the middle, you would put a different emulsion just in that spot that would respond more rapidly. So you could paint on a little bit of silver nitrate in the middle of your alternate process negative, and then you could have a long exposure for everything but that middle lens, which would have a shutter on it, and that would take care of your.
Well,
that would be the one thing that would be quick.
So that's an interesting.
I don't know. It'd be a way to save on the fancy emulsion by just putting it in part of the image. I don't know.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's going to open so many doors when I start really digging into this. I'm telling you, I don't know how many more cameras I'm going to end up having.
Well, yeah, that's the funny thing, isn't it? That's a problem for me. Too many of the darn things. Well, I'm really inspired once again by all of this. It's got me excited. And I don't know, last podcast I mentioned that what I kind of am trying to focus on is making big negatives for contact prints. I have the same idea that I want to make my own prints, and I'm not ready, or I don't have the time and the inclination right now to make a regular darkroom with the enlarger and all that. But I have trays. And I love this idea of making big negatives. I have a printer that can print a big negative out if I do it digitally. But I think the idea you're having of doing direct, basically paper negatives, is super appealing. So that, that all happens in the camera, and then you can always scan it later, and invert it if you want or not, and whatever. I don't know. That seems really what I would like to be doing in terms of making prints is something along the same lines as what you're thinking of.
Yes, I would just like Nicole or somebody to figure it out before me.
Yeah. No harm in that.
Well, we'll see.
Inspiration is really good. Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So you're still basically starting with Cyanotype at this point for these, or are you thinking of? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
It seems to be a process that's slow, but also that you have mastered. It's like one variable at a time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have covered homemade emulsions, cyanotypes, the cyanotype video series very briefly, which we need to do a plug at the end for, and homemade cameras for the purpose of shooting homemade emulsions, which I'm going to twist your arm and make you check back in every once in a while. I want to see this TLR. Maybe we can have some conversations about mirrors offline, but that's a little in the weeds, I think. Is there anything that Nicole, you or you, Nick, want to cover, or you think we've done it?
Actually, I wanted to show you something that I built. This is a 5x7 pinhole camera. Her name is Trinity. I named her. So there's 3 pinholes. And it's really a weird design. What I did is that the center hole is more of a telly, and these are more wide angle. So I wanted to see how it would work in combining those two together in an image. I've been testing with it, and there's a quite interesting thing that happens with this, and I don't know how, but say, for example, if I place myself here, I end up showing up here. And if I place myself here, I end up showing up here. It's really awesome. I don't know how this happens or how it happened. So, Nick, I can't hear you.
I would say that's normal.
Well, no, but I mean, in a sense that if, for example,
it's crossing all the way across. Oh, exactly. I see what you're saying.
And
but that's weird.
The tricky thing is I have to be very specifically placed. Otherwise, part of me will show in the middle. You know what I mean? It's really,
Yeah.
it's kind of freaky. Like I was really
I wonder
like
if they're
freaked
angled
out.
a little bit or something.
I don't know because you see, I don't use like calculations that are exact.
This looks
I
like
kind of just
precision duct tape to me.
the tape maybe, but I kind of just see a vision in my head, shape. I just build it, and that's it. So the cool thing, it's really, it's just so cool. So, for example, I just tried one where I had myself in the center this way, and then I had my hand on this side doing this, and it appears here where I'm like this. You get it? It's like freaky.
Yep.
I don't know how that happened, but it's like I gotta play on opposite sides to make it the right side. It's really weird. So I've been like, really digging down with this thing to try and figure everything out again. But I want to do this outside, so and see how that will turn out instead of doing it in the studio setting. But
Are you
it's really,
shooting
really
paper negs with them?
Yes, I am shooting paper negs. Yeah. I do have 5x7 film, but for now I'm just gonna work with paper. It's a lot easier to kind of go through than the film itself.
Much faster to figure things out.
Yeah. So
that's a great looking camera, and I'm also really kind of amazed by how far apart your pinholes are to be all hitting that little much smaller 5x7.
Yeah, that
Or
is a
maybe they
little. That is something that I think if I had maybe had them a little bit closer together for the size, for the back. So you see, it's really kind of getting that edge there, and it is a wide angle. So I'd have to play probably further with distance or something like that, trying to figure out how I can get myself all fit in.
That must be what's causing your switcheroo thing, because if it's super wide angle and everything gets reversed in any lens situation, it's basically shooting you all the way to the opposite side.
Yeah.
Now I want you to be able to open and shut the shutters like.
Well, that's what I'm going to add. That's what I'm going to add with this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to just do it with tape. I am going to make something where I can just like lift and then put down. That's what I'm going to do for sure.
That sounds really exciting.
It's much easier too, because it's just a matter of a flick instead of trying to peel off the tape or stick it back on if I want to use something else, one of the other holes. So that's kind of where this has gone. So that's this is the build I decided to make when I couldn't continue the TLR because of everything closing down, and I had an itch to build something, and this is what I ended up making. Yeah.
And so, what kind of exposure times are you getting with this camera and a paper negative?
For the middle hole, I'm getting about it's an F287. And is it 287, I think? And it's giving me about roughly 2.5 minutes. Again, depending on how close that light is to me and how much light I'm using. But it's not that bad for time.
Right.
I can do 2.5, 3 minutes, and that's good. When it starts getting past like 4 minutes, it's a little.
I can't hold still for anything close to those
shaky,
times. My personal time is in the split second. I think I'm Mr. Blurry. I don't hold still at all. Maybe if I was anesthetized, but that's not much of an image.
And the side holes are about a stop faster. So that's kind of where I'm playing with. Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Do you have other pinhole cameras or any sort of homemade cameras that are hidden there under your desk, Nicole?
Well, there's ones I built from before. There's a 5x7, 2 5x7s that I built. I don't
know if we've seen them.
I don't think so.
Let's have a quick look while we're here. What I want to see.
So this is a 5x7.
Does that have 3 pinholes?
No, it's just a little
shutter.
A little shutter here that I made. And
a little artist palette shutter,
Yeah. And that's kind of it. This, I actually put a smaller than normal pinhole. I put a 0.35 on here on purpose, and it creates a nice vignette with the images, which is really, really pretty. When you're doing landscapes and stuff like that, it's really nice. It creates a nice vignette around it. I wanted to experiment with a smaller than pinhole and see what would happen, and it's kind of neat, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did with that one. And then I have one that's more of a telephoto. It's a 5x7. It's more of a telephoto. Basically, they're all kind of the same general design. And there's my little piece of tape here. It just open and close with that one.
And one of the things
Are you?
Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you using a 5x7 film holder with these?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Yeah, that saves so much trouble. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
go on, Ethan.
Oh, I just really like, as we start talking to more and more camera builders, like certain camera builders have real aesthetics, and like you can tell, like if you've seen 3 or 4 of their cameras and you see the fifth, you know who made it. Like the first one I realized this was when we talked to Graham Houghton at Chicken Thumbs on Instagram, and like his cameras are really beautiful, but like take the aesthetics of like Apple boxes and sort of like backstage props. They're all like spray painted black with white numbers on them and made out of similar materials in similar ways. And like the one thing that now I have realized is like the Nicole Small signature move is the Velcro straps on the back. I've never seen that before. I think we're going to see a little bit more of it in the future, but Nicole, did you buy like a 600-foot roll of Velcro? Like I have 600 feet of elastic shock cord that I use for this purpose, but Velcro seems nice.
Actually, it's the dollar store. I'm telling you, you can get so many things at a dollar store, and they sell them in little packs. Maybe I don't know how long they are, and whenever I remember, I just pick up a whole stack of them, and I just chuck it in a drawer, knowing that I'm eventually going to use it for something. But it definitely helps.
Are they a little stretchy?
No, they're not stretchy. They're not stretchy.
Well, you could add a little elastic at one end if you needed it. Yeah.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
You could. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Hey, what else?
Those cameras look really great. What else do you have? Says Ethan.
No, I wanted to know what else winds up with, so like when you have this is cool. When you have like a solution, I have these 3D printers for making cameras, but like I got a 3D printed valve in my toilet now. I got a 3D printed foot on my couch. Like things start to get 3D printed. Like I wonder where else. I mean, this has little to do with cameras, but where else the Velcro has showed up in your life?
just with this stuff. Yeah. Okay. So this is an 8x10 that I made.
Nice.
And this is the little thing here, and I made my own ground glass as well.
Oh, whoa!
Right. Excellent.
Yeah, I made my own ground glass for it. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the box.
Hand grind it with like 2 pieces of glass and aluminum oxide powder, just like.
Yes, that's what I did.
Yeah, that's fun.
I did, and I kept going and going and going until it looked about right. Yeah.
And that lens, is that a pretty?
It's from a 4x5 graphics camera.
What's the focal length?
It's
135.
Yeah, 135.
Oh, so an Optar probably. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Those right. So that will probably vignette on 8x10.
I did some portrait and it didn't vignette.
Oh, nice.
Actually, they're on my Instagram somewhere.
Well, I've never tried it. I just would have assumed that you'd need to be at least a 210 millimeter focal length. But that's at infinity. Of course, if you're doing portraits, it's fine. Of course, that's what it is. You're not focusing on infinity, so it's fine. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, that's great because then it's nice and wide. So you don't. Yeah, that really should work really well.
And I also use I had these old Caulkin filters that I had bought a long time ago when I used to shoot 35, and it's a close-up lens. So in order to change the perspective, I'll put either the close-up 1 or close-up 2, and then I can get a different composition-wise and bring it in closer in, which is how I love my images. So it's kind of neat. So instead of it, I can just leave it there and just stick something on there, and then I get a different frame.
Is that is it on the lens board it came with? Is that a 4x5 pacemaker lens board? It looks like aluminum.
Yeah, it is actually the lens board.
Yeah. So I'm sort of standardizing everything to that. That lens is the lens that was on my dad's camera that he carried as a reporter when he started working as a reporter. I have his old Crown Graphic, and it has that exact lens. It's a really nice lens. It's actually surprisingly good. And I have been switching everything to those lens boards because it's just easier. I'm mostly using old press cameras, and I can swap everything around. And and I'm even making it so I can mount them on other cameras, like switching all the cameras to that standard, because I just don't like taking them, unscrewing it and changing it.
Nick just bought like a $90,000 digital camera that he's now putting graphite pacemaker lens boards on.
You're grossly exaggerating, but yes, I am going to make a little bellows for it. Yes.
Of course.
I'm definitely doing that.
That sensor nice and dusty.
No. No, I just standardized the M65. There's a guy in Russia. I think he's in Moscow, or maybe he's in Belarus. I don't remember, but he makes adapters that fit a lot of modern cameras, but then connect to a plain M65 ring, and they're really inexpensive. You have to wait a couple months and pay the shipping, but they're great, and then that means you can just put whatever on the camera once you get that first connection, and it's nice and close to it's short too, so yeah. Well, we'll see.
All right. I think now is the time of the show where we ask Nicole to tell everybody where they can find all of her projects, and I am going to make sure to put at least the Cyanotype video series in the show notes. It is a real favorite of mine. I think, I've been looking at it. I guess you started it right before COVID, maybe early COVID, and I have not really left my house or taken any pictures in a year. It's first up on my list of something to tinker with.
So you can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm mostly active on. And that's Nicole Small _1on1. And you can also find me on Facebook. I'm not on there too much, but it's Nicole Small one-on-one portraits. And you can also find me on YouTube, which is again my name, Nicole Small 1-on-1. And I also have a coffee page that you can find me at Nicole Small 1-on-1 as well. That's where you can find me. All my new projects and such. Yeah.
They're great. And Nick.
What? You want me to try and remember all that stuff? So yeah, Instagram, I have Avynick, Avynick, is the handle I use there, and I'm just Nick Lyle on Flickr, and I post a lot of stuff on Flickr because it's a better way to actually look at images. But I put occasionally sort of the better pictures on Instagram, and other people see that. And I am active on the Facebook group for this podcast. I don't like Facebook at all. I refuse to post anything except propaganda on my own page, but the groups are great, and they're really where everyone is. And so I spent some time there among several different groups, and mostly associated with other podcasts. So that's where you'll find me online.
And you can find Graham at Homemade Camera on Instagram, and you can find us at the Homemade Camera or homemadecamera.com. Okay, thank you very much, Nicole, for joining us. We hope to see your progress
Yeah.
pretty soon.
Thanks for all the tips.
Thanks for the great ideas.
Oh, thank you. Bye.